to the State Network of Educators training webinar for creating resource card images. Let's get started with a few introductions. So our Director of Instructional Supports is Heidi Cruz. She is on maternity leave, so she will not be able to join us today. And I will be your host. I am Amy Theory, the Assistant Director of Instructional Supports. Also with us today, we have two awesome Smarter Balance staff members on our communications team. We have Brad Walker. Brad is the Associate Director of Communications. He's really great at taking complex tasks and presenting them in user-friendly formats that are both visually appealing and functional for users. So you've seen his work and experienced his work on the Smarter Balance pages on the website and also on the digital library storefront. And if you've used his sample items, he created that as well. So thank you for joining us today, Brad.
No problem. Thanks, Amy.
Yeah, we're just so happy to have you here. Joining us today is Renee Bassick. Renee is our new digital communications specialist. And for those of you who have recently noticed the boost in our awesome social media messaging, Renee is really the face behind many of those posts. So she is so talented, and she has a passion for and has won awards for video production projects. So we're really happy to have you. And thank you, Renee. Thanks for joining us.
For having me.
Yeah. So this webinar is the first of a professional development series that's created with the SNE in mind. One of our goals is to provide ongoing support and feedback to the State Network of Educators. And this one really was inspired at our last SNE workshop based on some questions that I received from you directly, and then also from some demonstrations that some SNEs gave us. So came back and I had some discussions with the communications team, and we put this together for you. So this webinar will also be added to the new SNE training site and will be part of the required training. So you're getting it up front and the first time. So let's get started with our, let me also add, all the training webinars will be digital library in the forums, so you will be able to access them. If in the future you miss one, it'll be recorded, it'll be there. It's always great to be here live so you can participate with questions and add to the conversation. We would also ask and encourage you to join the webinar forums so that you get updates and are privy to questions as they come in after the webinar. So let's go ahead and clarify our intended learning goals for today. Our learning goal is for participants to be able to recognize and understand the need to include a resource card image with every new resource that's created and uploaded into the digital library, and also for participants to gain tips and resources to support creating these cards. We know that your participant level may vary from beginner. You've never created a resource card with any of your resources, or you may be an expert. So we just like to challenge you to soak up the information at whatever your level is and to come away with a few tips to help you when you create your next resource card image. So how will we measure success? Our success criteria will be to use the tips in the SNE user guide when we create our next resource image card. SNE user guide, what's that? Well, here's just a snapshot of the user guide that our communications team helped put together for you. It is a 3-page resource that will provide a wealth of information to help you as you create new images, both for the digital library and for your classroom. I definitely could see using this guide with my students as a guide to help them as they're creating visual projects. And I could also see using these resource card image, the idea, in some of my own presentations in the classroom. So at the end of the webinar, we will provide you with a link, but the webinar is actually going to go through each of the sections. So this overview will be that we will look at general graphic tips and considerations for images, how to find images. We have some great links to some sites with just a ton of images. Tools for creating the resource cards. We'll have a brief demo, and then at the end we will talk about contracts. So let's start with the why. Why do we have this as a topic and as a priority right now? Well, as you can see on this picture, we have several resources in the digital library that do not have source card image. And this little gray mountain-like picture, on this page, they all look the same. But when you actually have them lined up right next to a resource card with an image, it can appear that these are incomplete, and it can also be a distractor that leads to a user not actually opening the resource. By not including the resource card image, we're actually missing an opportunity to grab the user's attention. So in a random sampling of the current digital library resources, we've found that approximately 50% of all of our resources actually do not have a resource card image. So this could actually be a lot of missed opportunities. So let's compare this not having a resource card image to what it could look like with the resource card. So for some end users, the missing resource card is a non-factor. It's not something that is for or against. But for, some users have told me they read the titles or they use the sorting features like the rating system or the green check marks for exemplars. But other users have definitely given feedback that without a picture, they do feel that it is an incomplete resource. And sometimes it just doesn't jump out at them. So we want to save educators time and provide them with high quality resources. So by being purposeful about including an image that connects, it can grab the reader's attention. So our first learning goal is really to understand the why and to recognize and understand the need for the resource card images. So just taking a look before, and these aren't all the same resources, so it's not a true before and after. So I'm going to pass the baton over to Renee, and she is going to walk us through, let's see, oh, when we practiced, her name was right under mine. Now I have to find her name.
I'm here.
I can do it.
There we go. I love it. On our end, we actually see this ball going over to Renee.
And I just caught it. So I'm going to start with some general tips for creating these images, and the reason I've been recruited to do this is because I create a lot of images every day, and a lot of them are for social media, but the principles are very similar. We want to use minimal text because they tend to be small images.
There, join.
The digital library specifically is very small. It's 202 pixels by 105 pixels, which is tiny, and I'll show you how small that is. Well, you did just see how small it is, but in some of the tools we'll be using, you'll get a sense of what that actually looks like when you start overlaying text and things like that. So we'll start with these tips, and the tips are really pretty much tips for just about any graphics you will ever create, but these are very important for the digital library. So what we want to do is we want to use minimal text, and we want to make sure we have good color contrast. And the reason that's important is because users who may have visual impairments or things like that will have trouble reading or discerning the text on top of the graphic, or the color combination just won't be easily legible whether you have perfect vision or you are visually impaired. So we have a little example on the screen right now of color choices to avoid. This is not all the color choices you should avoid. This is just an example of how poorly it can be to read text on a colored text on a colored background. So these are just an example. We want to make sure that we aren't really including new information on the graphic, and by this I mean if you don't want to include a bit of information on the card that isn't on the resource card in text next to it. And this is important for accessibility, but also it's just helpful so that as somebody's scanning quickly through the digital library, you're making sure that they're getting the most important information. We want to emphasize that, like I said before, this is a very small size image, so the simpler you can be, the better, and you can still have a striking, colorful, attention-grabbing image, even though it's simple. And this is a tip that can be really helpful, is playing with layers and transparency. And this sounds a little bit more advanced, but it isn't that hard to achieve. And by using layers and transparency, you can help set text or an image off against the background, so it'll be more easily recognizable, readable, that kind of thing. So those are some just very high-level tips, and again, just reinforcing this idea that we're working with a very small image, so we don't have to be complicated. Okay, so when we're thinking about the types of images to select for some of the digital library resource cards, we want to think about being inclusive, right? So we want, if we're using pictures of people, we want to make sure that we're representing diversity. We want to make sure that the images are visually engaging, and as part of being visually engaging, human faces are one of the most engaging visuals you could possibly use. That's not saying that you should only use people's faces, but our brain is conditioned to most quickly recognize another human face. And so that's one of the reasons that a face, especially one displaying emotion, tends to be some of the most engaging images you see online or just about anywhere. You can think creatively about what images you choose to use. So it doesn't have to literally reference something that's in the title of the resource, but as you review the resource, you may find out that they're talking about something related to, and it gives you an idea for an image that's connected but not directly referenced. And then just remember, again, I'm going to keep reinforcing this idea that less is more, because really a simple, bold image can be even more powerful than a complex image, especially if you're using text as well. So where can we find all these great images? We can find lots of them for free, which is really important because we're all on a budget. So we want to stick to, we don't want to steal images, let's just say that right out, but there's lots of resources where you can find open license images. So they're part of the Creative Commons, or the photographer or artist has relinquished the rights so that they can be used openly. So here is a list of a few places that I personally use to find images, and I'm sure as educators you also use some of these sources, and maybe there's some new ones here. One of the places that I look quite a bit, and it's a really great resource, is the Creative Commons search. That's the first bullet under sites with open license images. And again, in the PDF that we're going to send, there will be links to all of these, so you don't have to write them all down. You'll have a link straight to them. So the Creative Commons search is great because it covers a few different sources, Flickr, Google Images, and Wikimedia. And Wikimedia is all open license. Library of Congress is a great resource, especially for historic images. We can also use USA.gov because images and videos produced by the US government, including the military branches, are free to use. A couple other options that I know are a source of really creative images is Pixabay and Unsplash. Those are another two great ones. So one note on attribution. So even though all these images are part of often Creative Commons licensing, which means they're free to use and to edit, many will require the inclusion of a credit. So you want to read the fine print on the licensing. And in the PDF that Amy sends, there will be a link to the Flickr Creative Commons Attribution Guide. And you can use that kind of as an example. So when it's required, include the attribution information at the bottom of the resource card. But even when it's not technically required, it's a really nice way to say thank you to the creator and model good, like, creative citizenship. So use the photographer's name, as we have here in this little image on the screen right now. So it may not be that it was actually required by the license, but it's just a nice act. So now, when it comes to the tools to use to edit images, we have a few suggestions. You can use anything you want that you're comfortable with. But we found a couple things, and we use a couple things regularly that are simple, free, and give you a lot of flexibility. So just a quick overview of the tools, and then I'm going to jump into a little demo. But Pablo by Buffer is a tool that we think is probably one of the easiest to use. It's kind of stripped down the tools so that you can produce things quickly and easily, export them, and you're done. It doesn't have as much functionality as a tool like Canva, and neither of those have nearly as much functionality as like Photoshop. But in a lot of ways, that's a good thing because it kind of helps keep you constrained a little bit in a good way, and it can make producing these much quicker, much more efficient. So in addition to a tool like Pablo and a tool like Canva, there's a really good chance that some of the resources actually have good images nestled inside them, and you just have to kind of take a look for them. So often if you click on the View All Materials button inside a resource, you'll see that there's video and PDFs and lots of other things, as you know. So sometimes looking through the resource itself, you can find some really nice images that you can take a screenshot of. And the two tools that we can use that everybody should have available to them on their computer, whether you're on a Mac or on a PC, is the snipping tool through Windows and using the grab tool through Mac. So the snipping tools, we have a little icon of that on the left, and then Amy very nicely created a little screenshot of what it looks like, what key stroke you use on a Mac to actually do a screenshot. And again, this stuff's all included in that PDF, so you'll get that too. Now, we're going to do a little demo of Pablo and Canva so that you can kind of get a sense of how these two tools work. Let me share my screen real quick.
And so I will jump in while she's queuing up her screen. And what Renee said is Pablo is definitely super easy for the end user. I do prefer it because there are less things to confuse me and to navigate. And you can truly make a resource card in 30 seconds to a minute. And so it's super easy to navigate.
Yes.
And Canva I've also used too, but I think it all comes down to what your preference is.
Right. So where I'm going to start is with actually selecting a resource. So I'm going to use an example of something I've been working on this week because it's Earth Week and it's leading up to Earth Day. And so I've been producing some social media highlighting resource cards that are connected some way to the environment. So I found this one. It happens to not have a resource card image, so it was a perfect example. And the title is Humans Interact with the Environment. So let's start with this one, and I'll take you into Pablo. So Pablo, very unintimidating interface, I think. You can jump in and start using it right away. Amy started using this one, and her review was that it took her a couple minutes and she was in there and creating stuff. So that's good. So the first thing I would do is double check the size you're using, and this default on the right here, which just has a little Facebook and Twitter icon in there because those are sizes that work well with this, or this is a size that works well with those two channels. Also is the right, or very close to the right aspect ratio for a resource card. So just stick with that one because it's easy, and the digital library will actually resize automatically when you upload it. So if it's not exactly the right pixels, that's okay. It will crop it a little bit, but it's unnoticeable on this one, so it's fine. So the first thing I would do is let's just see if there is a great image already in Pablo that we can use. And they source their images from some different places, but Unsplash is one of them. So you'll see that icon pick up. So let's just search for Earth, because that's easy. And we'll see there's a whole bunch in here that are interesting and related. This one's kind of fun because it has some human interest and it's kind of cute and clever. So all I had to do was click it, and it brings it right up here into the screen, into the canvas. One note on here is that they automatically populate with a filter. And the filter that it chooses is light contrast. And what that does is just ever so slightly darken the background so that anything you put on top of it appears more clearly. Now, if you choose not to use text, you can take this off and just make it normal, right? No filter. And actually, in this case, the text is pretty legible even without the filter. So it would be up to you if you decide to use it or not. I'll leave it off for now. So when it comes to editing the text, if you choose to include the title of the resource card on the image, which you don't have to, so you could export this one as is with just the image. But if you choose to edit the text, I often will just copy and paste right out of the resource card to make sure I get the title perfect. And then I will paste it in there. And this is what you get. Now, it's okay. It's not probably quite big enough to be legible, so we'll bump up the size a little bit. We will drag it so it's centered, and it gives you some crosshairs so you know when you've arrived at center, which is very nice. And then you can play with the font too. So I'm a bit of a font geek, so I always play with the fonts because I love them. So let's say we'll just go with permanent marker. It's very human. So there it is in its full size. One little trick I've learned is that on some of the fonts that are all caps like this, if you actually make them full, like actually uppercase, it will make them slightly bigger. So if you want to set off humans, so there you go. So humans interact with it, and so you can do environment as well. And you can see that humans interact and environment are just slightly bigger than with the, which is nice because it sets it off just a little bit. You can also upload your own image. So if you found an image outside of Pablo that you really want to use, you can click this button on the bottom and pop something new in. You can also change this image. So once you get your text in, if you have second thoughts or you just find something else you like a little bit better, you can pop something else in. Now this is a good example of an image that I would probably put a light contrast filter on just to make sure that text pops. Oops, and I should spell things correctly too. So when this happens, this means that we need to widen that text box out a little bit. Oh, this is acting actually kind of funny. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so then you can center it or not. You can do whatever you like with it. And then all you have to do is hit share and download, and it'll give you a few options. Likely, you want to hit download. You probably don't want to pin it or share it to Facebook or anything like that. So go ahead and click download, and you'll have your image in your downloads folder. And that's basically Pablo, so it's pretty easy. Amy, was there anything else that we wanted to highlight in Pablo?
I also really like the reposition. So right above, you can change the size of the graphic a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. So that's like the crop button, so it kind of helps. And you can actually also do this if you wanted to, something like that. Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out. I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much it. I love how easy it is. And then when I saved to my downloads, because I was doing a batch of resource card images at once, I actually just created a folder for pictures that was just called resource card images. And I saved everything right there, so it was really easy for me when I went to upload as well.
Yep. Okay, so Canva, and I'm going to click over to my tab, and I don't want to scare you all, but this is, it's filled with all the stuff I've been working on this week. So here you go. So as you can see, I've been playing with this humans interact with the environment. These are all for social media. When I create a card that would be used for a digital library resource card, here's the best thing you can do. So the presentation template right here is actually the right aspect ratio. It's 1920 by 1080. It's way too big. but it works, and it will automatically resize, so you can just use this. That's easy enough. However, there is also the option of using a custom dimension. So, custom dimension, you could then tell it exactly 202 by 105, which is the size of a resource card. Now, it's tiny, and so it's going to blow it up. You can see down here in the corner that it's at 644%, which is huge. So if you actually make it 100%, this is the realistic size of the resource card image. So it gives you a really realistic way of seeing what it's going to look like when it's eventually done. So Canva has a lot more tools than Pablo does, but it still doesn't have to be intimidating. So there's layouts you can use, which are all these here, and this basically just kind of gives you the way the background would look. So it kind of throws an image in like that. Now, the fun stuff is under elements. So there's free photos, and so again, we'll search for Earth, and we'll come up with all these fun things you can play with. So some of them have transparent backgrounds, so you can actually just drop the image right on top of whatever you're using. So you can use layers that way. So you could do something like, well, actually that's not a good example because that one's not free. That's the other thing I'll point out to you is that they're in the corner. It'll tell you which ones you can use for free and which ones actually cost money. And typically we can go with the free ones, and that gets us really far. So I don't think actually I've had to purchase any yet, which is great. So let's find something to drop in here. This is the one I was using earlier today, which I thought was kind of fun. So we can drop this in, and I'm going to cover that little sheep in the corner because he's too hard to see anyway. And we'll just get this hand sized in there. So dropping something in is as easy as that. And then if you want to lay any text in, you can use either these basic heading types up here, or you can drop stylized text in. And either one works equally as well. This one's kind of fun because it does some of the work for you, so you don't have to play with sizing quite as much if you find something you really like. So if we just threw the happy birthday one in there, we could make the top part say humans interact, and we can make the bottom part say with the environment. This might not be the best example of legible, but it gives you a sense of how this works. So you're going to want to resize this a little bit. And with a longer title, it might be a good idea to not use text at all. And I'll show you what this looks like once we drop it down a bunch. So let's see. So that's 100%. It's legible. The script probably isn't as legible, obviously, so you might want to stick with something more like block text. And so if you do use one of these, in order to, you can change any of these fonts automatically just using this up here. So you can do that. You can play with the spacing, the line height, so it's not too crowded. You can ungroup the elements, and so say we just want to get rid of this one altogether, we can delete it, and then we can make all of our text right here using this one. Something like that. And so at 100%, pretty legible. So, and you can also, as I mentioned before, you can throw different backgrounds in there. This one might be hidden by the, yeah. So you can drop different backgrounds in if you'd like. Then it'll just keep changing things up for you. You can keep playing with it until you find something you really like. Lots of text options. The elements options also includes shapes. which are really helpful if you're, maybe trying to highlight something specific. I use shapes sometimes as I mentioned earlier, a transparent background. So we'll say we'll do this, and then if you click arrange, you can send it back. And you can also change the transparency, so you can do that. And in this case, I'd probably make it white because we're using dark text, and that will help it stand out against the background, something like that. So there's lots of tools you can play with here. And then when you're done, you can title or retitle it here, and then download it. And my only important tip on this is to make sure that you select either JPEG or PNG file to download. These will be the formats that will upload to the digital library. You'll have trouble if you use any of the others. So I typically use PNG files. They are a little bit better for graphics. JPEGs are a little bit better for photography, but they're both, at this size especially, it's not going to matter really which you use. And so that is our live demo of Canva. Amy, anything else to add on Canva?
We did have a question in the chat box, and the question is there a way to search for a term along with a free filter? So like you would only, is there a filter so that you could only get the free selection?
So that's how they get you. So no, not unless you upgrade your account. So if you do upgrade your account, and the account is actually relatively affordable, I think it's $10 a month or something like that. And if you do upgrade to the work account, you can then sort by free or paid. But in the free account, you're just going to have to kind of endure the scrolling through all of the images and looking at the little icons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say that this is the tool that was demoed for me at the SNE workshop, and the person who showed it to me actually did educational blogging, and she used it all the time. I really like it. I think it's easy to navigate. I like how it has the text feature. I think the text feature in this one is stronger than Pablo, but ultimately I think it's whatever you're comfortable using. And I do want to spend more time in Canva. Because just watching you switch out the background so quickly, that's awesome.
Yeah, it can be so much fun that you get lost in it. I will it can be a rabbit hole a little bit, but it is fun, and there's a lot of flexibility. There's a ton of free images, and then you also do have, again, the option to upload your own images. So some of these I have queued up here are from the Library of Congress. So they're images that I've used to illustrate resource cards and on social. So yes, lots of flexibility. I also have our logos queued up here too. Not that the resource cards need logos, but if you're working on something for another reason or another purpose, you can also pop logos on top of things. So okay, so I think I'm going to stop sharing.
Do we have any other questions for the demo for the chat box at this time, maybe? And we will have some more time for questions later, so if they come up, just throw them in the chat box at any time.
So yeah. I think, the only other thing was to kind of wrap up the screenshot topic. And again, screenshots, basically that means using your computer to take a photo of whatever is on your screen at that time. So it's what we would use to take an image, take an image of an image in the resource card itself, and then use that to be the image for the resource card. Was there anything specific? I know the snipping tool for Windows it behaves like a little application. So I think Amy had suggested pinning it to the taskbar so you can get to it quickly. Otherwise, to find it, you have to actually kind of type in your search box, and it'll pop it up, and you can launch it from there too. And then, let's see, for Mac, I think I mentioned this before, it's super easy. You can just do Command-Shift-3 to take a screenshot of your entire desktop, and then you can edit that in Preview. Also, that's the free kind of graphics tool available on a Mac. Or you can do, and I love this functionality, it's Command-Shift-4, and it'll give you crosshairs that you can drag and select a subset of your desktop or whatever window you have open at that time. And then if you want some more advanced features, you can use the Grab tool, which is available in the Utilities folder on a Mac. And I think that kind of rounds out the screenshots. So I think we can throw it back to you now, Amy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was going to jump in to show how to upload the cards directly to the resource. So let's see here, my screen monitor 2 here. So I'm just in my resources, and here's an example of a resource card that I actually use the snipping tool on. I actually just used the cover page of a PowerPoint slide. So I just used that snipping tool and saved the image, and so it was super easy to add. The same thing on this one here to show the table. I think we used something similar potentially for the playlists when those were created. But to add the resource cards, so if you wanted to change a resource card that you currently have, or if you wanted to add one for one that doesn't have it, you just go to Edit. And then, or if you're doing a new one, it's here under Materials. And it's right where you would upload all of your other resources. So it's Add Resource Card Image, Browse, and then you would pick whichever resource that fits with the resource you're adding it. And then it's Upload. And if you're working on a contract, or you have to have actual special permissions to use the edit. So if you're doing that, you just want to make sure that you save. But if you're just doing a brand new resource, then you would just continue on with your update. So it's pretty easy. So a question came in, is it possible to edit after it's been posted? Only if you have the special permissions, so the SLP permissions. So on the contract, those that take the contract will be given that special permission so they can go in and update the ones that don't have resource card images currently. That's a great question. That's a great question. Will someone be adding a resource card image to a posted resource without your permission? Well, our goal is to have a resource card image for every single one that's in there. So if you would like to select to create your resource card, and specifically, you can definitely send it to me and I would add it. But yes, the goal is to create a resource card for every single resource that's in the digital library. But again, if you have resources that currently don't have resource card images and you want to take the lead on that, we can definitely make that happen. And so to make that happen, you would just reach out to me and we could make sure that you have the permissions for just a small amount of time, and then you could go in, change your, upload your new resource card images, and then we would remove those permissions. Does that sound okay, Amy? What about people who are not on this webinar? So the webinar will be recorded. As it is being recorded, it will be sent to all SNEs. And so, yes, anybody who currently has a resource, if they want to take the lead on updating their resource card images, that would be awesome. That would be amazing. That would definitely help with the need to add them. But yes, those who are not on the webinar can also be available for contracts, or they just need to watch the webinar and they need to just get in contact with us. So we do have 12 contracts, but I'll get to that in a second. So let's just review and reflect on our learning goals. Our learning goal was to recognize and understand that we do need resource card images, and then also to gain tips. So I'd like you to think about and maybe type into the chat box one of the key takeaways, one of the key tips that you'll take away from this webinar today. Or if you know that you're going to go back and use Pablo or the snipping tool or your Mac screenshot, you know, that might be your key takeaway today. So I'd love to see the chat box fill up with a key takeaway from today. And our success criteria will be determined when we're making those new resource cards. It sounds like maybe you're going to jump right in and look at creating yours. I hope that this is a useful tool for you guys. And then our other success criteria will be to see the enhancements when we get into the digital library as users when we
and lots of people commenting on how the editing tools seem user-friendly, learning about new tools for creating resource cards, and people saying they're going to try things out. So quite a few, yeah, lots of appreciating the demo. Already someone, oh yeah, and Jill, you saw that. That went to everyone. I already found the snipping tool and pinned it, so that's great.
Yeah, I have snipping tool at the bottom of my screen. I found often if somebody asks for something, I'll just take a quick snip and send it in an email, and it's sometimes quicker than retyping everything over. I love the snipping tool. And yes, I love that you said you could take your own pictures if you want to. And if you really want to, you could share your own fabulous pictures on Unsplash or another site so others can use them. I just think I love the idea of sharing our stats. So that's awesome. Thank you for all that feedback. And thank you, Erin. Any other questions in the chat box? So in the survey, we're going to ask for a learning check on our webinar goals and success criteria, and we're going to ask for feedback, any additional feedback that you might have. What went well for you today? What could be improved? We want these webinars, we created them for you. We want them to be beneficial for you. So any feedback that you can have to improve them or to tell us what we did was useful and that you'd like to see something like that again, then we want to continue with that format. And then also if you have ideas on content for feedback for future SNE webinars, some content that you'd like to see, then please put that in there as well so we can plan ahead. And definitely if you are interested in the contract, complete that survey right away. Awesome. So we're right at time. Are there any additional questions? And if you have any questions, put them in the chat box. And if you don't have any questions, then have a fabulous day. And thank you for joining us.